So we just go through the uh, cost sharing contracts and the payback contracts, and it's easy to see that in the uh, ski jacket example, both payback and cost sharing contracts achieve the maximum possible profit in supply chain. And the parameters of the contract was selected so that the supply chain profit in each case is the same as in global optimization. So in this case, we consider this as one organization, like manufacturer and distributor as one organization. It's the same as the previous lessons. So if you forget, please look back the previous video and slides and try to help me calculate mm, what is the supply marginal profit and what is supply chain's marginal loss and what is the optimal production quantity, and try to calculate the profit of this supply chain based on the optimal production quantity. So this will be a homework for you guys. So please calculate it in Excel file and submit it to Blackboard in assignment folder. So I will just leave the global optimization part for you guys to do it by yourself. Okay, and now we will move to the next one, the contracts with asymmetric information. So we can see that the manufacturer build the capacity based on the forecast from the buyer, right? However, from the buyer might inflate its forecast. So there is always a probability that the forecast is higher than the real demand. So the question proposed is if we can design contracts that achieve the credible information sharing or not. Interestingly, that this question is answered in the affirmative. So they suggest two contracts that can achieve credible information sharing. The first one is capacity reservation contracts. So what is capacity reservation contracts? So in this contract, the supplier will decide the menu of reservation price to motivate the manufacturer to review its true forecast. So the buyer will pays amount of money to reserve a certain level of capacity. And of course, the reservation price will be offered by the suppliers. So by choosing the amount of capacity to reserve with the supplier, the buyer somehow give the signal of its true forecast. Okay, and the second contract is the advance purchase contract. So in this case, the supplier will charge the advance purchase price for firms' orders placed prior to the building capacity. So it means they will have two different price. The first price is for the orders that they place in advance before the supplier build the capacity. And the second price is another additional price for an additional orders the buyer make after uh, the supplier already produced products when the demand is realized, and the buyers will have incentive to make order in advance, right? So look at the because they can get cheaper price if they order in advance. So to look at the in advance order from the buyer, the supplier can see the true forecast from buyer. They can take the information, the true forecast from the buyer through their in advance orders. This is quite easy, it's quite straightforward to understand. Now we move to the last part, that is the contracts for non-strategic components. So as I already mentioned it at the beginning of this lesson, for non-strategic components, they can be purchased from a variety of suppliers. So the flexibility to the market condition is more important than a close relationship with the suppliers. So more flexible is more important for the non-strategic component. The commodity products like electricity or computer memories or steel or oil or cotton, they are available from a large number of suppliers, and they even can be purchased in the spot market. So it means we have various sources of suppliers. So for non-strategic components, we can select multiple supply source because we have a lot in the market. So by selecting the multiple supply sources, the buyer can they can bargain, right? Reduce the supply cost because many supplier but a few buyer, then the buyer will have more power. So they can bargain, they can reduce the supply cost and be more responsive and flexible to market conditions. And to have an effective procurement strategy has to achieve two objectives. The first one is they have to drive the cost down, reduce the cost, and the second one is reduce the risk. The risk will be separate in three main groups. The first one is inventory risk. Inventory risk due to the uncertain demand. So we know that demand is not certain, it's uncertain. So first we need to consider the inventory risk. So when the demand increase, the inventory risk will decrease, right? But when the demand suddenly decrease, then the inventory risk will be increased. So they have a negative relationship. The price or financial risk due to the volatile price. So this means the price keeps changing. Or shortage risk due to the limited component availability. So we try to choose the type of supply contract that can reduce the cost and reduce those risks. So let's see this first contract, that is long-term contract. Or we can call it another name, that is forward or fixed commitment contracts. So for this contract, we can eliminate the financial risk. So how the long-term contract can eliminate the financial risk? So long-term contracts specify a fixed amount of supply to be delivered at some point in the future. So they will determine the time in the future that a fixed amount of supply will be delivered. And in advance, the supplier and the buyer agree on both price and the quantity to be delivered to the buyer. Since the supplier and the buyer already agree on the price and the quantity to be delivered to the buyer, so the buyer bears no financial risk. However, they will take they will take a huge inventory risk due to the uncertainty in the demand and the inability to adjust the order quantity, because the quantity is fixed, so they cannot change the order quantity anymore, so inventory risk will increase. However, there is no financial risk. The second contract we can consider for non-strategic components, that is flexible or option contracts. So here in this contract, the buyer will prepays, mean pay in advance, a small fraction of the product's price upfront, and in returns, the supplier commits to reserve the capacity up to a certain level. And they separate it in two different price. The first one is the initial payments. It refers as a reservation price or premium. And the initial payment will be lost if the buyer does not exercise the option. And the second price, that is the buyer pays an additional price, and this additional price we refers as execution price or exercise price. So it means they will have a level. So if the buyer purchase up to like more than that option level, they have to pay an additional price, and that additional price are agreed by the buyer and the supplier at the time that the contract is signed. And the price of our products when they use flexible or option contract is equal to the reservation price plus the additional price, and that price will be higher than the price in the long-term contract. But here the buyer is flexible to adjust the order quantity, so they can reduce the inventory risk. So here all the risk is transferred to the manufacturer, to the supplier, not the buyer. In contrast, in long-term contracts, all the risk is on the buyer, not in the supplier. But in flexible or option contract, the risk is transferred from the buyer to the supplier. The third contract is spot purchase. Here, the buyers look for additional supply in the open market. They can use an independent e-market or a private e-market to select suppliers. The purpose is just to use the marketplace to find the new suppliers and force competition to reduce the product price. The final one is portfolio contract. Here the buyers sign multiple contracts at the same time to optimize their expected profit and reduce the risk. The contract different contracts differs in price and the level of flexibility, and they allow the buyer to hedge against the inventory shortage and spot price risk. So here is the summary of our 4 type contracts we can use for non-strategic components. For the long-term contracts, it's a fixed commitment made in advance. Flexible or option contract, the prepay for the option to purchase. Spot market contract is immediate purchase. Portfolio contract is the combination of the first three contracts option strategically. So so far we already learned all main type supply contracts for strategic components, for non-strategic components, for asymmetric information used in the case that the information is asymmetric. So hopefully after this lesson you will able to determine different supply contracts and when you should use what type of supply contracts. Okay, thank you.